will have some remarks. Other senators will have remarks, and we'll open up for questions. John, are you ready? Oh, yeah. Okay.
Good morning and happy first day of session. Thank you all for being here today. I am Senate DFL Leader Melisa López Franzen, and I'm joined by our DFL leadership team, Senators Nick Frentz, Senators Mary Kunesh, and Senator Fung He, to highlight Senate DFL priorities for the session that starts today. This talented and diverse leadership team reflects the talented and committed and diverse Senate DFL Caucus that is ready to get to work for the people of Minnesota. We're also joined by Senator Ron Latz, who will be a key leader as we begin debate on an issue that right now is top of mind for most Minnesotans, public safety. Today we start by recognizing how hard and unsettling these times of these past 2 years have been for all of us. Every Minnesota family, community, and business has been hit hard by the deadly pandemic that has upended our economy and strained our public health, our long-term care, and our child care systems to the brink, and Minnesotans are feeling it. In the coming weeks and months, we will press hard to address the health and economic fallout caused by this pandemic and push for a roadmap to get our state through it. And just as importantly, it will be our responsibility to call out policies and actions often spurred on by politicians that have only served to prolong this pandemic, and in the process hurt our state's health, hurt our economy, and hurt our schools and our families. And Minnesotans are ready to move on. Minnesotans are also unsettled. Rising prices, rising crime, and schools that are struggling to stay open. We know these are things Minnesotans have been grappling with in every single community. We've heard from families in our districts trying to make ends meet or finding childcare to close when schools are closed. I have a 5- and a 6-year-old, so I've lived through that too. We've heard it in meetings with community leaders and local law enforcement officers working on the ground to keep people safe. And we've heard it from school administrators, teachers, and parents who have been whipsawed by an unpredictable and relentless virus as they try to keep kids safe while giving them the quality education that they deserve. We've heard them, and now it's time for us to act. Although the Senate DFLers do not set the day-to-day agenda, we didn't come here to be passive spectators or partisan obstructionists. Our caucus is made up of serious legislators who will bring forth thoughtful and serious proposals. Our roadmap to deal with the issues that Minnesotans are dealing with. First, we will want a safer Minnesota with thriving neighborhoods and communities where Minnesotans can live, work, and raise their families. We will prioritize crime prevention by ensuring law enforcement officers have the tools and the funding that they need to serve communities and keep Minnesota safe. At the same time, we'll continue to work with community leaders to push for proven prevention strategies that we know disrupt criminal activity, stop violence, and improve overall public safety, including support for mental health and early intervention for teenagers, families, and neighborhoods and communities. And we'll promote community policing that is responsive, trustworthy, and accountable to the public it serves. Senator Latz will have more to say on that in about a moment. We also want an economy that works for Minnesotans, and will press an economic plan to accelerate our recovery and strengthen our state's prosperity by pushing for responsible tax cuts for families, seniors, and small businesses that put more money in their pockets while protecting the state's economy and its stability for years to come. By lowering the cost of goods and services to help Minnesotans keep more of their paychecks and help them with the cost of childcare and early education. By fueling Minnesota's recovery from COVID-19, by protecting the health and safety of Minnesotans, by supporting and creating job trainings and retention programs to create a skilled workforce that drives economic recovery and expansion. And we'll recognize the sacrifices of all our frontline workers and their critical role in keeping our economy open safely. Many of them continue to be stretched to exhaustion by this pandemic and running on fumes. We have heard them and we want to act. And finally, we will focus on health, well-being, and quality of life to strengthen and protect things that make our state such a great place to live. Unlike our GOP colleagues, we have serious plans to improve access to affordable health care that's there when families need it. And in schools, we will actively push to ensure top-notch teachers in every classroom and strong schools in every neighborhood. where parents and are partners, and every student has the resources they need to succeed in the classroom and in life. We want safe, stable, affordable housing for children, families, and seniors throughout Minnesota. Minnesotans want solutions to tackle climate change, protect Minnesota's precious air, land, water, and drive business innovation. In closing, we have a roadmap to save thriving communities and an economy that works for Minnesotans, and a focus on our state's health and quality of life. These are things that our caucus will fight for. We'll seek compromise. We'll work across the aisle, and we'll join forces with the governor and members of the House who want to join us. Where we will not settle is in protecting our democracy, to ensure access to the ballot box. We will push back against misinformation and election interference that undermines our way of life and fuels extremism. The leaders standing here with me today and our entire caucus will be actively seeking to solve the problems that Minnesotans tell us they want to prioritize. But we will never compromise on preserving our democracy that we cherish and that we swore an oath to protect. Thank you. With that, we will pass it on to Senator Latz.
Thank you, Leader López, Franzen, and other caucus leaders who are with us today. You know, we're living in unsettled times, and I don't have to tell you what all that means. It's a thriving but unsettled economy. It's an unsettled healthcare system with the pandemic. Democracy is unsettled. And our streets, in many ways, are unsettled as well. We've had a tough couple of years, and these are national trends. That doesn't make Minnesotans feel any safer, though, to call it national. But what it does do is it says that we can't rely on just the old tried and true solutions that are being offered by the Republicans to ramp up penalties, throw people in jail, put juveniles in adult prisons, and throw away the key. We've been working on, we have a lot of that on the books already. But the fact is, we need to focus our resources on where it's going to make a difference. And in my judgment, that means we need to boost our law enforcement resources. We need to boost community confidence in law enforcement so they'll share information to help solve crimes. We need to boost our law enforcement accountability. And altogether, then, this will boost crime prevention. When we talk about boosting law enforcement resources, I mean making sure we've got sufficient officers on the street to be responsive to crimes when they happen and to build the community relationships and to hear what's going on in the community to prevent crimes from occurring. And when they occur, to help solve those crimes. People know, in many cases, who the shooters were, who the carjackers were, but they're not talking because they're not confident that law enforcement is going to be responsible and effective and efficient in responding to their information before there's any retaliation on the streets. So we need to boost those resources. We need to get the numbers because the bottom line is throwing people in jail isn't necessarily going to stop crime from happening. People commit crimes if they think they're going to get away with it. Or they commit crimes because they're dealing with their own mental health or substance abuse crises. I've been in this field for over 30 years now. Those are my two main conclusions. And that means we've got to tailor our solutions in those directions. If people think they can get away with crimes, they're more likely to do it, certainly if they are otherwise inclined. And that means we've got to have police who can investigate. We've got to have police who can be responsive on the street when there are calls. You've got to have police presence so people aren't going to be stupid enough to commit crimes when the police are right around the corner or on the block. You've got to have a community that's confident enough to share information so that investigators have a place to go to find out who perpetrated the crimes. You've got to have a place for the kids, the juveniles in particular, many of whom are involved in this crime spree right now, to go after school or to do when they're not in school, in addition to keeping them in school. And that means, especially with the pandemic, when so many of those resources were restricted or shut down altogether, we need to reinvest in those community activities for those kids. And ultimately, of course, we need community confidence in law enforcement that they're going to be treated fairly. And that's where the accountability piece fits into all of this. Now, unlike Senator Limmer, who's actually called for defunding prosecutors, we're not supporting that. We support good funding for law enforcement, good funding for prosecution, and good funding for community crime prevention and community policing. And we think that data-driven, proven tactics will prevent crime and will make all of us, in fact, safer and feel safer when we go about our daily business. Thank you. I'm not sure who's next.
Good morning, everybody. Nick Frentz, Senate District 19 from North Mankato. Thank you for coming. Good to see everybody. I can assure you our caucus is very excited to get back to work. And with that, just a couple remarks about our economy, about our safety, and about our climate. Democrats are for working men and women and for equality, racial equality, gender equality, and equality of opportunity. And the policies that we're putting forth here today defend those values on behalf of all Minnesotans. Working Minnesotans have got to have more support. Working Minnesotans are common in greater Minnesota. I represent a rural district and proud of it. The changes that the Senate DFL proposed to make are good for the entire state, but more on that in a minute. We want to show support for small businesses. We want to have small businesses know, especially in the hospitality industry and others, that not only do we understand the struggle that they've been through, but that we will be there for them as we go forward, including unemployment, trust fund relief, which we can talk about later. Now, the Senate DFL will also support direct relief for taxpayers, either in the form of possible rebate checks or incremental tax reductions. Keep in mind, the budget surplus that we face now came about with no tax increases. So that money should be considered available to help the working men and women of the state of Minnesota. As the ranking member on the Senate Energy and Utilities Committee, it'll be my job, along with my colleagues on that committee, to address the issue of climate change and our need to transition to clean energy. This press conference would go for hours if we talked about climate change, but I'm asking the Senate GOP to hold hearings on the effect of climate change and what Minnesota can do to mitigate the damage that's been done. Examples that we see nationwide of that damage include hundreds of billions of dollars of insurance claims paid for climate-related storms. Those are costs, as we all know, passed on ultimately to Americans. We can make changes. Our number one need is to decarbonize. We innovate in America. We're leaders in Minnesota. We can continue to decarbonize in a number of ways, but I'll point out to you where the Senate DFL stands on just one of those, and that's in the transportation sector. Electric vehicles. Senate Democrats have been asking Minnesotans to look at the advantages of electric vehicles from a climate standpoint and from a cost of operation standpoint for years. And now look what our leading American manufacturers are telling us. Ford, General Motors, all electric fleets expected by 2035, and just a couple weeks ago you may have seen that Chrysler announced they plan to go to all electric by 2028. Let's get out in front of that, Minnesota. Let's build electric vehicle infrastructure. Let's lead that charge, not only for cleaning up our share, but to send a signal that we're leading on this issue and to invite other people to move to Minnesota to help us with that. It's no secret that I've been an advocate on public safety for us to continue to recruit and retain and respect law enforcement. I don't think I can do as good a job describing why we feel that's important and why that's an achievable goal, as well as Senator Latz. So let me just say, police want to see crime reduced as well. They want to get home safely as well. All of us want to see a reduction in crime, and Senate DFL priorities take a holistic approach to that, including funding, recruiting, and retention, but also looking at the other ways that we reduce the reasons that people want to commit crimes. And I encourage the media to keep an eye on the Senate DFL and Judiciary Committee to hear those proposals and why they're going to be good for our state. Finally, as a greater Minnesota legislature, I can't resist taking the opportunity to point out for this session, the Senate DFL is about bringing Minnesotans together. I have always choked a little bit as I listen to legislators and leaders talk about how they want to divide us. metro versus urban, rich versus poor. We don't need that. If you worked at a company that had people that were trying to divide the employees, that company wouldn't make much money and you wouldn't want to work there. If you played on a team where some teammates were dividing and arguing about how terrible the other ones were, that team would win many games and no one would want to be on that team. In Minnesota, we have to come together. We can win games, we can be profitable, we can be happy if we work together. And I ask all of you to listen carefully when legislators talk. And I tell you now, the Senate DFL will work to bring back together One Minnesota, to tell every Minnesotan that they're in it to win it, and that we can do that with these priorities. And I want to thank you very much for coming today. With that, I don't know who we're going to.
Hello, I'm State Senator Fong Per, one of the Assistant Minority Leader. I represent Eastside St. Paul. And I want to say that we all been through a lot within the last 2 years. Although the storm of pandemic is not yet over, I'd like to see this session as a new start to accomplish something better together, where we are intentional on solutions to make Minnesota a better place for everyone. As you heard from our leader, Senator Melisa Franzen, and my colleague, it is our Senate DFL priorities to develop a healthy Minnesota. And a Minnesota with a strong economy, safe, and inclusion. I received a text just an hour ago from a constituent wishing me well, wishing all of us well, and asking me if I'm excited for today, the start of this session. And yes, I am. I am excited to be here today and look forward for every single day throughout this session for the opportunity to make it right for Minnesota and the people by creating more jobs, increasing support for small businesses, investing in community on public safety, and to better fund education for our next generation. We also need to change the paradigm on racial inequity and intentionally invest in our BIPOC and New Americans communities, as well as setting goals for clean energy, and first of all, properly reward our essential worker who has been on the front line protecting us during the pandemic. So thank you.
Good morning, I'm Senator Mary Kunesh. I represent District 41, which is a conglomerate of communities between Northeast Minneapolis and St. Paul. Very pleased to be here on our first day of the 92nd session of the state legislature. As a teacher of 25 years, I recognize, and we recognize as a caucus, the struggle that our schools and our educational process has really struggled with over these last 3 years. Who would have imagined that we would be in this kind of a situation, not just for 1 year, but for 3 years? And that means that many of our students have lost perhaps even a full year or more of their educational instruction. But on top of that, we know that our teachers, our administrators, our superintendents, our students, and our communities have suffered because of the pandemic and the lack of consistency within our educational system. It's nobody's fault. It's the pandemic's fault. It's not a teacher's fault. It's not a superintendent's fault. It's not the governor's fault. This is what we are dealt in the last 3 years. I left the classroom just a year ago, and so I'm very familiar with the struggles of our students and the teachers as they have pivoted so quickly to do online, hybrid, in-class educational instruction. I had a conversation with 2 teachers yesterday. One is an EL teacher and one is a classroom teacher. They all have young children themselves, trying to find daycare that is going to allow them to do the work that they are going to do for our students has been the biggest struggle. And so as we look forward to this next session, and as a member of the Education Committee, I look forward to finding really positive, plausible solutions to how we can improve and support our teachers. That doesn't mean reducing licensure expectations, but it's how can we lift the teachers that have stuck through this? How can we entice thousands of teachers who hold a teacher's license in Minnesota but have chosen to leave the profession to come back and align with us once again? So those are some of the things that we will be looking at. Not banning books, not micromanaging curriculum, not trying to tell superintendents who know best what's for their communities what to do and what not to do, but how can we as a state lift up our teachers, lift up our educational system, support their mental health, support their financial necessities, and get on that road so that we can educate those students for the future, because they are our workers of the future. They are what we are going to build our economy on. They are going to be our doctors, our lawyers, our politicians, all of those things. And so we have this opportunity, especially with a surplus, to pay back our educational system. Do you remember when we borrowed from our students, where we balanced our budget on the back of our students? And who felt that the most? The classroom teachers. The students did. And then in repaying it back, did we ever fully repay? No. So we want to make sure that we are putting our money into our educational system as a priority, that we are building for the future, and we are making sure that should anything like this happen again, we are ready to make sure that all of our students and our communities are safe, healthy, happy, and thriving. Thanks much for being here today.
All right, we have time for a few questions, so we've got to get the senators to the session.
How about public safety? Can you talk about specifically on retention and recruitment of officers? What specific legislation funding are you looking at?
So thank you for that question about retention and on law enforcement and public safety. So a lot of us have actually worked and listened to our communities. I represent a Senate district which has Edina, Bloomington, Eden Prairie, Minnetonka. In a period of about a month, we had 3 carjackings. We got together with our mayors, with law enforcement to listen to them. How can the state partner with you? We're not telling them what to do. We're asking them to tell us what would support them. And I'll tell you, many of those conversations have been around social support, mental health support, help with getting kids back on track. It hasn't been necessarily having higher wages. It's been more about the resources they need of wraparound services for our community. So we're listening to them. We don't have a dollar figure. I think those will be coming in judiciary committees with proposals that are being laid out in the House and the Senate. So we're open to those discussions, but we're going to be listening to law enforcement and our mayors and our local communities, what they need to get through this chapter that we don't want to repeat. We want to make sure people feel safe in their homes, people feel safe at the grocery store and in the child care setting when they pick up their children. So those are the things that we're going to be looking at, particularly from the folks on the ground.
And Senator Latz, you said one of the reasons people do this is because they get away with it. So does that mean tougher sentences?
You know, tougher sentences is a simplistic and I think overused solution to dealing with criminal justice. We're all going to be better off if you're more likely to get caught when you do commit a crime, and even better if the crime's not committed in the first place. I don't look at that as an effective solution. There's a place for it. I've carried bills in the past to increase penalties and so on, and I'm not ruling those things out. But you can't simply wave your wand and say for someone who commits a crime now they're going to do 4 years instead of 3 years in prison. That's not going to stop them from committing the crime if they think they can get away with it. All right, so things like Senator López Franzen was talking about with the community getting together on the local levels, sharing information, sharing resources, sharing data. There's a proposal that's been in the pipeline for a little while now to increase the ability of law enforcement and others in the system to share information between mental health, juvenile systems, law enforcement investigators. There are concerns about who has access to that broader database, but that kind of information can go a long way, not only towards solving crimes, but getting people help that they need before they go on to commit more crimes. I think you'll find a broad consensus between all of us at or most of us at the legislature in terms of getting more law enforcement officers in the pipeline, recruiting, helping them get through the if they already have a 4-year degree, helping them get through the certification process, maybe subventing the cost of doing that. It's an 8-week course. Expanding and improving on the Pathways program to bring more diverse people into law enforcement. Those are the kind of things that we know will work. So there's a lot that we can do, and a lot of proposals on the table to look at it. But I think we need to reject the 1 and 2 off simplistic solutions, because this is a complex problem. As I noted, I've been in this field for 30 years, and I'll tell you, 90% of the cases that I see are tied to substance abuse. Someone's been drinking too much, they've been taking drugs, or they're having a mental health crisis, which is usually all mixed in with everything else. And especially with the kids, I mean, you ask, Senator Kunish is, just out of the classroom. The stories from the classrooms is that the kids are reacting so much more quickly now to the stresses in the classroom. Well, that's a function of the pandemic. But they're not just reacting in the classroom. They're reacting on the streets. They're acting out on the streets, too. And so we need to target our resources in those places. I think that'll be much more effective than passing a law that's going to apply to crimes committed on or after August 1st. And by the time they get into the system and they get put away and you end up teaching them how to be better criminals as they're spending longer time in prison, it doesn't solve any of the problems in the long run, I don't think.
You used a phrase that I want to ask you about. Parents are partners.
Yes.
And that's almost the phrase that people use to describe the things that Senator Kunish was concerned about, going to school board meetings, threatening. What do you mean by parents are partners, and how is that phrase that you use different from the way the Republicans use the same phrase?
Well, I'll tell you what I mean by that. I was just talking to a judge who works in the juvenile justice system just yesterday as we're doing our own homework and we're talking to people on the ground, talking to what they need, what they see, and how we can partner with them. And that's precisely it. We need to partner. One of the things this judge told me was when we're putting a child or a juvenile in the juvenile justice system, we don't have the supports close to home, and that there's data-driven programming that says that having the parents, the family close in that recovery, in that rehabilitation, it is actually more positive for the outcome. Just as Senator Latz was saying that we need to make sure that we have the supports for those kids, we've been underfunding that section, that area of our budget. It's been ad hoc. Since I joined the legislature back in 2013, I had the bill to improve and increase funding for youth intervention programs. We've done it, we've risen the funding from $5 million a biennium to $7 million. The cost to fully fund that area is more closely to $20 million. So we kind of touch on it, but we don't really fund it appropriately to ensure that we have the resources there. And now with the pandemic, we've known that we have to catch up. So that is one of the proposals that is data-driven, that we know youth intervention programs are proven strategies. But when you talk about parents, they're part of the equation on helping to rehabilitate the youth. We don't want to just lock people up and throw away the key, especially when they're young and can be rehabilitated, whether it's on their mental health, whether it's on curriculum in schools. We need to be partners, and we want to do that with law enforcement. We want to do that with parents who need that in the school, in the classroom, and we need to do that for communities. So that is what I mean, partnership, and parents need to be part of the discussion when it comes to helping us pave the way in that roadmap to recovery as a state.
I thought you used it solely in context of education, not in criminal justice.
Excuse me?
I thought you used the phrase in connection with education, not with criminal justice.
Yes, I did, and I think it overlaps both of them because parents are part of the equation when it comes to having an ecosystem of safety. When we talk about safety, we talk about the classroom being safe, we talk about the home being safe, we talk about our streets being safe. And all that right now, in the cases that we've seen in my district, a lot of them, and in the news, it's been a lot of juveniles who've been committing some of these crimes because they're getting caught. Not that adults aren't doing it too, but that juveniles are getting caught, and we need to make sure that we have the supports in place and that doesn't come in isolation. So having the parent part of that, whether it's getting them back to school, we talk about truancy, when kids are not showing up to school, and we have data on that, and we have to have better data on that so we can make sure that they have the tools to get back in school. We have to work with the parents.
On the unemployment debt, do you think that the legislature should go ahead and address that now, backfill that money now, or as Speaker Hortman has suggested, should that be tied up with, linked to spending on other priorities, like the frontline worker checks and paid family leave?
Well, I'll talk about it as also a small business owner, so I understand the dynamics of what that means to my small business and what it means to other larger businesses too. We've actually, back in 2013, I carried the bill to lower the rate to the lowest we would have because we had that fund was flush with cash. It was, we had a surplus. Obviously, fast forward with the pandemic, it's now in a deficit. To fill that gap, it's about $2.7 billion. As you all heard, our surplus is around $7.7 billion. It does not include inflation, so it's actually closer to $6 billion. So it's a big ticket item. And I would say our caucus really feels strongly that we have to keep our promises on frontline workers before we spend a significant amount on another issue. We made that promise back in our last session. We didn't keep our promise, and we're still basically fighting over it. We know that our frontline workers now have worked even harder, and we need to support them. They need a morale boost. They need to see that we take their work and honor their work seriously, and that is with frontline worker pay. So I think that goes before unemployment insurance.
We have time for one or two more questions.
Senator, you conceded the fact that you're not setting the agenda for this legislative session. So with the fact that this is going to be a session right before redistricting happens, or new districts, how is it that you're going to actually have something that you can have your fingerprint on that said the DFL did something this legislative session other than the bonding bill?
Well, I keep saying that the action's going to be in the Senate. A lot of the proposals and the obstruction is going to happen there. So I would say you're going to hear a very active, very vocal Senate DFL caucus on the issues. We've been very vocal already. I know that they've been talking about Social Security tax reduction. Our caucus has a position on that. We all voted for it last session in 2021, and we paid for it. It was a surcharge on investment income of $250,000. So people making money $250,000 and above, that's where we paid for it. And when I say paid for it, it's because if we do a permanent tax cut of any kind, this session with a surplus, we might be hurting our future fiscal stability and structural budgeting because it's one-time money. So we have to be careful. But at the same time, the Senate DFL has had a on-the-record position voting for that particular tax, and the Republicans all voted against it. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We know where we need to focus on, and it's people who are really hurting, starting with frontline workers, starting with our kids, and then we can move to other big ticket items that, we probably should take them on a regular session, not a supplemental budget session.
As a follow-up, you've referenced then basically a tax expenditure situation. What do you have as a program or a policy to backfill, like sports book, legalization of marijuana? What was your backfill?
Well, that would be great if we would actually have a hearing on cannabis legislation, which I've carried as well as a chief author. But that also is being politicized, so we don't see that happening this session. There's been talk about sports wage embedding, but we haven't heard the proposals yet. So I think they're on the table, and we can get to a compromise that could be potentially a way we can pay for some of these proposals. But again, it's one-time money, and we have to be cautious and fiscally responsible that we don't set ourselves up for a deficit in long-term budget sessions.
One last question. That it?
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Nice job.